Censorship is technically forbidden by the US Constitution due to the absolute right to freedom of speech. In practice, however, it has been applied in subtle and not so subtle ways to keep filmmakers in line.
In the United States, the Motion Picture Association film rating system is used to rate a motion picture's suitability for certain audiences based on its content. This is the responsibility of the Motion Picture Association, or MPA. The MPA rating system is a voluntary scheme that is not enforced by law. Films can be exhibited without a rating, although most theatres refuse to show non-rated or NC-17 rated films.
The MPA rating system was introduced in 1968. It's one of various rating systems that help parents decide what film is appropriate for their children.
In 2013, the MPA rating systems were visually redesigned, with the rating displayed on a left panel and the name of the rating shown above it. A larger panel on the right provides a more detailed description of the film's content, and an explanation of the rating level is placed on a horizontal bar at the bottom of the rating.
G is for general audiences. All ages are admitted. Nothing that would offend parents for viewing by children.
PG, parental guidance suggested, may contain some materials parents might not like for their young children.
PG-13. Parents are urged to be cautious. Some material may be inappropriate for pre-teenagers.
R, restricted, contains some adult material. Parents are urged to learn more about the film before taking their young children with them.
NC-17, adults only. No one 17 and under admitted.
The components taken into account for rating the motion pictures come under the categories of violence, language, speech, substances, nudity, and sex.
Depictions of violence are allowable under all ratings, but must be moderated for the lower ones. In G-rated films, violence must be kept to a minimum. In PG-rated films, it must not be intense. Violence that is extreme or persistent and realistic will generally.
So I think it's violence that is both realistic and extreme or persistent.
Violence that is realistic and both extreme and persistent.
No. Violence that is both realistic. Violence that is both realistic and extreme. So I think something realistic and extreme.
Okay, violence that is both realistic and extreme.
Or
persistent.
Yeah.
Violence that is realistic.
Both and realistic.
Oh, violence that is realistic.
Both realistic.
Oh, I just wanted the will to live.
It's getting hot in here too.
So hot. Violence. No, for God's sakes, the actress is trying to work here. Violence that is both realistic and extreme or persistent usually requires at least an R certificate.
Some realistic and persistent violence going on here.
There is talking about violence, these two are killing each other.
Language that goes beyond polite conversation are generally allowed in G-rated films. However, stronger words are not allowed. Profanity may be present in PG-rated films, but one of the more sexually derived words as an expletive will generally require at least a PG-13 rating. More than one use will generally incur an R rating certificate, as will the use of one of these words in a sexual context. Known as the automatic language rule, this rule has been applied differently in different films depending upon the context.
It is sometimes claimed that films rated PG-13 are only able to use the F word once to avoid an R rating for language. There are several exceptional cases in which PG-13 rated films contain multiple occurrences of the F word. The King's Speech, however, was given an R rating for one scene using the F word several times in a speech therapy context. The MPA refused to recertify the film on appeal, despite the British Board of Film Classification reducing the British rating from a 15 rating to a 12A, which is the equivalent of a PG rating in the US. This was on the grounds that the uses of the expletive were not directed at anyone.
Drug use content is restricted to PG-13 and above. Depictions of cigarette smoking are considered in a film's rating.
Nudity is restricted to PG and above. More than just brief nudity will require at least a PG-13 rating. Nudity that is sexually oriented will normally require an R rating.
Film ratings often have accompanying brief descriptions of the film's content and why they require certain ratings.
So what are some of the criticisms of the MPA ratings?
Refusal to announce exact guidelines have led to considerable controversy. Many claim that the decisions are somewhat arbitrary and not accountable to an exact standard.
The film rating system has had a number of high-profile critics. Some of these are Roger Ebert, David Ansen and Stephen Faber, as well as many filmmakers.
Firstly, it is argued that there is too much emphasis on sex and language, as opposed to violence. This often allows for excessive amounts of gruesome violence.
With regard to profanity, it is claimed that the rating system is geared towards the number of times the profanity is said, rather than the actual theme of the film.
It is argued that the organisation tries to enforce an outdated attitude towards sex in the films.
The MPA has also been criticised for having a strong gender bias and holding films with LGBTQ content to a higher rating standard than content in other movies. It is suggested that there is a bias against homosexual content compared to heterosexual content, particularly with regards to sex scenes. Filmmaker Darren Stein further insists that his tame teen comedy GBF, which features multiple same-sex kisses but no intercourse, strong language, violence or nudity, was rated R for being gay. Independent distributors claim that major studio releases often receive more lenient treatment than independent films do.
We have also made a video about censorship in the UK. Check that video out next.
Thank you so much for watching, and please give us a like and subscribe to see more videos.